I really think that in a fast changing world, as you were saying, full of crisis, and when you more than ever need ingenuity and fresh thinking, you really have to do things different in terms of how you work with your team members.
Welcome to the Leading Through Crisis podcast, brought to you by Revisionary, exploring resilient leadership in a world of constant change. Every few weeks, Céline Williams, speaker, strategist, and trusted advisor to leaders navigating change, brings conversations that explore how to deal with the inevitable and perpetual shifts of leadership. These discussions reveal practical insights, thoughtful strategies, and stories of resilience to help you lead with clarity and calm.
My guest today is Ernesto Gómez, founder and CEO of Aspen Mindset1, a consulting firm dedicated to helping organizations and individuals reach peak performance. He is also the author of Regrowth, How Organizations Can Overcome Stalling by Unlocking Their People's Potential. Welcome, Ernesto.
Hi, Céline. Very nice meeting you. Thank you for having me in your podcast.
It is absolutely my pleasure. I'm happy to speak with you today. And before we get into all of the interesting things that I know you're going to share with the audience, I'm going to ask the question I always ask, which is the name of the podcast is Leading Through Crisis. What comes up for you, or what does that phrase mean to you when you hear it?
Hearing some of your episodes and you talking about crisis, inevitably I thought about what is my interpretation of a crisis.
Yeah.
And really a crisis is, depending on how you frame it, it's just the point where things, go wild and you have disruption. But very often you have also moments of crisis in the making, which may not be as clear and as radical, but are equally important. And I would even say that is for any business executive, it's extremely important to have the foresight to detect, when a crisis, it's still young, but eventually would hit you. So what I see, it's a moment of radical or deep change. And that's exactly what I love talking about, the moments where, what you used to do don't work anymore. And then you have to pivot or find a different way to address things and survive. And these days, I think we have our good share of crisis all over the world. Actually, if I may,
Please.
I would like to talk a little bit about something that I've been thinking. If I were to ask your audience, if we were to take a poll here and say, tell me about 2020 to 2025, do you think that the last 5 years have been extremely difficult, very challenging, full of crisis? We had the pandemic, we had a war, we had a value chain that got just bananas. We had many, many things. And if people were to raise their hand and say, do you think that's probably the most demanding period that you have ever faced in terms of business-wise, I probably would get 80 to 90% saying, sure, this has been hectic. And if I were to ask your audience also, what do you think about the next 5 years? Do you think that the next 5 years are going to be easier? You think are going to be more difficult or about the same? I would probably put my bet on people saying it's going to be more difficult. Just because, just think about the world these days. We have a technology disruption, geopolitical risk everywhere. We have a trade problems all over the place. And what this tells you is that, crisis is here to stay. And not only here to stay, more than likely it's going to get even worse. And by the way, I always tell this to business leaders. If you think that you have been, challenged in the last 5 years, this next period not only is going to be more challenging, you also will be called to do more with less. On top of that. So guess what? It's not going to be easy at all. So that's kind of the playing field where, in terms of crisis, where I think we should place ourselves and say, well, if this is the case, what do I have to do about that? What can I do? And how can I face it and also succeed. So I think that's an interesting point. But I was trying to refer to, how I frame a crisis and what a crisis means. And this is going to be the new normal, I believe.
Years ago, I was doing a talk, and at that point, I had a slide up where I was talking about the rate of change just from a technology perspective, and how in the past 100 years you could see that rate of change go up. And it was at the point, and this was again, I don't know, 8 years ago maybe. And at that point, it was impossible for one person to really track and understand the rate of change, just technology. And that it was going, because it was at an exponential rate, the amount of change and what was happening, and it was just going to keep getting faster and more. And I say this because what I hear and what you're talking about in terms of the crises and the changes and the instability, it's not only technology. The problem we have right now is that it is multifaceted. So while I was talking about one thing, it's really, hey, guess what? The disruption is everywhere, and that change is everywhere, and it is exponential. So it's not going to get easier. It's going to become more balls to juggle in the air. And what do we do?
I've been hearing about the pace of change for a while, many years. And I always say, things are changing really fast. But I can tell that now is different. I mean,
Yep.
the scenario that we're facing, specifically with artificial intelligence, climate change, and all these things that are happening, tells us that rate of change is going to be even more problematic.
Yeah.
And if you think about organizations and people leading teams, you kind of have to figure out, I need to do something different, because if I don't, I'm just going to be playing this by the same rules on an environment that is not the same anymore. So I really think that has big implications for leadership.
Well, first off, it's easy to say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's just keep doing the thing that's worked so far. That's the easiest thing to say. I'm not saying it's the most correct, but that's what a lot of leaders and organizations do. It's also very easy to ask the question, well, what should we change, without actually really getting into it or knowing where to start or understanding what to do with it. So I say that because I'm curious, from your perspective, your experience, when you talk about a change of approach, thinking about things differently because of everything that's happening, what is even a starting point? Where do we start?
I'm going to answer your question, but please bear with me. I'm going to take a turn and then go
just for the
answer.
record, I love a turn, so take all the turns.
If you think, I use this example that actually comes from Steve Ballmer, the former Microsoft CEO before Satya Nadella and after Bill Gates. He describes organizations as three concentric circles. The outer circle, think about, your offerings, what you bring to the market, products, services, whatever, that is in touch with, the customer. If you think about that, how companies operate these days, I was reading the other day that we operate with products or services. 90% of those products and services are legacy products that have been for a while, maybe changed a little bit, but not quite much. It's just a small amount of products that are really changing, a bit, while the environment is really very demanding. And the environment and the expectation for customers are ever changing. So right there, you have the first conflict. And if you go to the next circle, inside circle, the second one, that's where you find your capabilities. The capabilities that you have to deliver those products. Whether it is, if you're Amazon, your logistics, your warehouse systems, if you're Walmart, your stores properly located, well, proper light, good prices, etc., etc. And by the way, those capabilities are really hard to establish. Most companies have 5 or 6 capabilities at the most. and you compete with those. It takes a lot of time, investment, years to be good at that.
Mm.
So you have your products and the capabilities that your products require to serve your customers. That's where most people, place attention when there is a crisis. Say, I need to change my products, I need to change my capabilities, etc. And there is a, good reason for that. But the third and final circle, it's actually culture. It's the soft wiring of the organization that makes everything possible. And that's where the willingness to change resides. And that system will choke or facilitate change when customers expect something different. You have to modify your products and you have to modify your capabilities. And we all have heard about, well, this is the way we've always done this here. It's just the way it is. We heard like, yeah, I have uh, my turf, and I'm gonna succeed in my part of the company, and I don't care about everybody else.
Mhm.
You hear like, simply people trying to say, what's in it for me?
Mm.
Just to make that change. So when you say, where do you start? You have to touch the three levels at some point. And since the third one, people, it operates with intangible forces, it is really difficult to appreciate. Now, where do you start? I believe that you have to start with teams. The very basic unit of analysis of every company is a team. I mean, you hire individuals in order to perform within a team.
Mhm.
You filter that, and you have to start with teams. The aggregation of teams will give you the company.
Yes.
Margaret Thatcher used to say that there is not such a thing as society. There are individuals and families. And it's pretty much, valid for organizations as well. So teams make it or break it in terms of how do you face a crisis, how do you face uncertainty, how do you face new rules demanded from your customers. The team is the basic unit of analysis in any company, and that's where change happens. And I have a story about, I used to be VP of marketing for a CPG company
Mm.
in Mexico, and we sold, cold meats. And we had an SKU, an item that was the biggest seller of all. It was a package of ham, sliced ham,
Huh.
you know, and a presentation of 250 grams. And why 250? Because that's the way it's been always, for many, many years. Back in the day, when you go to the deli counter, back in the day in Mexico, customer is, give me a quarter. And they sliced, quarter of a kilo, and then that's what they give you. So when things evolved and cold meats were packaged, they say, well, since people order always a quarter of a kilo, let's do a package for a quarter of a kilo. And that was the way it worked for many, 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 many years. And we had one of the most profitable items in the portfolio, probably the most.
Hmm.
And so it's about 20 grams per slice. So you have 12 slices, more or less, for 250 grams. And the team started thinking and, talking to customers and talking to our people in the deli counter. What happens? How often do you really slice a quarter of a kilo when they ask you for a sliced product in the counter? And they say, well, very often I go beyond, a couple of slices, something like that. And people don't seem to mind. And then we figure out that some people go and buy products, every week. So they wait until Sunday to replenish their stock.
Mm-hmm.
And they may run out of product maybe on Friday, but they would, wait until Sunday. So we decided to challenge that and to say, what if we change the size of the package? That was like a belief, the way we have always done this. And what if we go beyond that? And we added 2 slices. So instead of 250, we went to 290. I tell this story because for a company, that's a really, really risky move because you produce thousands and thousands and thousands of packages. And if you make a mistake, your customers are gonna abandon you and go with the competition. So we run that risk. We challenge that belief, that idea of this is the way it's always been done. To make a long story short, that was 10 years ago. The package still sells for 290 grams, and we created a lot of profitability because the whole system improved. Now we have more kilos sold per package in the distribution system that lowered the price per unit, the cost per unit in terms of transportation. We sold it 2 extra slices and we charged them. There was room, in the price point to do that. And we increased sales by 16% just by doing that.
Wow.
The question was, what kind of mental models we have here, and what do we think for sure that it's there, but we may want to challenge that. So that dynamic in the team end up changing a value system that, in terms of the valuation for CPG companies, created literally more than $100 million in terms of value. So that's a really small example of how a decision within the team can have a lot of impact.
Well, there's a lot to be said for first off, the having the type of culture on that team, even if it's not in the whole organization as a whole, but on the team where it's okay to ask that question and to challenge that is it, it feels safe, it's okay, it's allowed, whatever, there's space for it, whether it's formal or informal. But also the importance of questioning the biases that we have that drive us to do the things the way we've always been doing them.
I present in the culture chapter what I call the stewardship model, which actually can be leadership/stewardship. But I'd rather use the name stewardship because I really think that, as much as we are leaders, I really think that the word leadership puts a lot of attention in just one individual,
Mhm.
and attracts all the lights into the leader, this person that has the foresights to do things different, and everybody else is a follower. So I really think that in reality you have to really balance that out, and I thought that using the word stewardship served that concept better. And I really think that at least there are 4 things to empower a team that anybody can do, whether you have a small company or you have a small team or you belong to a larger corporation. And these 4 things are very well known, but I just put them together. The first one, of course, is ownership. You have to establish a commitment and honor that commitment and own your results and do whatever it needs to you have to do to deliver on what you promise. The second one, it's balancing ego versus truth. Very often in teams and people leading teams, there is this ego component about, I'm the highest person. I'm in the team. I have, the title. I'm the highest paid person. I've been right before, so I'm always right. And I really think that to a certain extent, ego is good, but you have to have a limit because going beyond what is healthy starts to be toxic. And I say ego versus truth because what you're really trying to find in a team is the truth. And I believe it was Steve Jobs who used to say he didn't want to be right, he wanted to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you want to be right all the time and you want to, being the smartest person in the room, that's fine. But probably more than likely you will be better if you pay attention to what some people have to say in order to have the right solution and make the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that psychological safety, of course, that we have all heard about, is extremely important. You were saying feel included, being able to speak up without, being punished, and being able to challenge the status quo is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, the genuine willingness to make your colleagues in the team better. I mean, to really, really, nurture each other and say, if I can help you in any way to, up your game, I'm here to help. And just people trying to make others better, I really think it's really valuable. So those four things, if you want to have a team that performs better, you have to have ownership, ego versus truth, the genuine interest of helping others get better, and psychological safety. That will really change your path quite a bit. And going back to the example that I was providing, the team felt, that they had psychological safety, and there was no ego there. We said, we just want to find the best solution for the problem, no matter where it comes from and who says that.
Mm-hmm. It's one of the things that I love, those four things, and I think they're really important. And one of the things that I have talked about ad nauseum, I'm sure, on this podcast as well, is that I think the most overlooked leadership quality that is the most important, one of, if not the most important, is humility. And that is that you are confident in what you are doing, but you have the humility to recognize a better idea, to not get hung up on always having to be right, to listen to other people. So it's that there's confidence, but there's also humility. And what I hear inside of everything that you're talking about with that culture is that humility is built into it.
That's spot on. Thank you for sharing that. I really think that that's exactly the kind of the insight behind, what we've been saying. And it's counterintuitive, because typically when you're the boss, you are there because you're supposed to be always right, because the company puts you there because you have to lead a team, because you proved that your decisions were good, and then you're going to be right all the time. And a track record of results, don't get me wrong, it's really good.
Of course.
But you have to really be open to hear different opinions. I always tell, especially people starting in companies, in organizations that want to, become the boss or move through the hierarchy. So this belief of you escalate position means or implies that you just go to the ladder, step up, and start, escalating. When in reality, what really happens is that your team pushes you up. It's not that you escalate by, going over others or trying to look like, the star. Is that in reality, when the team works well and results are achieved, then is when, of course, when you shine. So it's in your best interest, really, to allow that pushing up that the team creates, instead of trying to trample over them and try to, get accolades and wear all the medals yourself. And it's, again, for people of my generation, that used to be the case. But in a world, fast changing world, where you are supposed to make the best decisions and you don't know how things are changing, you better be prepared to hear, others, and take into consideration with humility, as you were saying, what, others' contributions, to get it right,
Yep.
to make the best decision.
So I think there we're in a really interesting time right now because the traditional model, you said your generation, but it's been traditional. It's even, in the world of millennials, right? Like there's still the elder millennials, they still have that they were raised in a very hierarchical work environment, right? So it was you make your way up, you make these good decisions, you move forward, this is the way it is. Once you're at that level, you make all the decisions. It is, you're here because you're right. That is kind of built into the how we have traditionally thought about leadership. Well, yes, there are lots of people who have ended up in leadership positions, whether it's CEOs or otherwise, that are there because they have that track record. Their track record, and we actually know this, it does not predict our future success. That is not the thing that predicts future success. And so we're in this pocket right now where listening to other people, to your point, to that team environment, the better the people around us are, that's going to be the predictor of success, when we can listen to them and hear them and actually have some awareness of all the potential change, because that not one person can't know it all. It's not possible.
In my book, I refer to this stage as, unlocking potential,
Yeah.
because that's the way where you unlock potential. I'm going to oversimplify things, and I give you the advanced warning. There is, the way I see it, predominantly to unlock potential, you have two models. One is what I call pull for potential, and the other one is push for potential,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
In the push approach, which is something that we have always seen, you have the leader, applying a lot of pressure to the team, saying you have to do better, you raise the bar. Of course, you're never satisfied. You just apply pressure and pressure and pressure so that people, do their best. That push model works to a point, and especially in a crisis, actually, when things have to be done in a certain way because you have an emergency, it's kind of, you can understand that you have to use that. And that push model has been kind of the baseline for many executives and all these iconic figures that we see, even sport coaches and people in business. But what happens with the push potential is that if you do it all the time, it ends up creating some kind of ill will in the team.
Mm-hmm.
People start resenting that, and also is not really effective for innovation, creativity, resourcefulness, foresight, because how can you push for that? If you see that the most important innovations in the last 10 years, the idea of, Airbnb or Uber, they were not ideas that were pushed.
Right. Right.
So that's kind of the baseline. And then you have the pull model. And in the pull model, you kind of say, well, if there is potential within the team that can really go to the surface, I need to connect with the team and explore with them what it's in there so that they can unlock it. And it's not really a matter of pushing, it's a matter of understanding with your team members what are their essential qualities, how they can bring those qualities to fore, how can you help for them to do that. And actually, that's when people started to be more engaged, because all of a sudden they find things inside them that they can do and do very, very well. And once you start doing something well, you get better at it, you want more of it, you improve, and all of a sudden, what you thought was your limit for potential goes beyond your expectations,
Mm.
and your potential is a moving goalpost. So what I say is, instead of using the push model as a baseline, use the pull model as a baseline, and switch to the push if needed or when needed. But I really think that in a fast changing world, as you were saying, full of crisis, and when you more than ever need ingenuity and fresh thinking, you really have to do things different in terms of how you work with your team members. And I really think that is some people find it complicated because you are not supposed to get close to your employees. You're not supposed to have these conversations with them because you're the boss, and that could be a sign of weakness maybe. So those ideas, which are just bad mental models, are limiting people from allowing the potential to surface in their teams. And that's what I really think that we need to move to, in an environment that requires our constant innovation and participation and idea contribution. We have to connect more. And for that, you need humility, as you were saying. So kind of the stewardship model that we were talking about, the humility element that you brought to the conversation, it's part of the pull leadership model. And when I say, and I don't mean to say that we have to get rid of the push, because
there's a time and place.
It's a time and place, and it works. And sometimes it's needed. But we have to really understand that there is another way of doing things, and we have to allow that to be our default mode and use the other one sparingly.
Yeah. So if someone is listening to this and they're thinking, well, we've kind of always defaulted into the push, like that's just kind of what we do. How can I even get started with the pull? Like how do I do that? Would you have any advice for them? Like, here's how you could get this started today.
In the book, I talk about, to do this at scale, you have to work in 3 dimensions. One is talent density. You have to have the right talent, the right density of talent in the key positions of your company where you have your competitive advantages, your point of difference, etc. You have to have the culture, component that we were discussing. And then you have to have a mindset component as well. And those 3 things interact. And mindset is really a double click into the culture, actually, because when we are in an organization which is made out of people, culture is means to an end. We're in the mindset business, actually. What we're doing, it's establishing frames to look at the world and operate accordingly. So when you get into that part, for somebody in your audience hearing, I recommend doing 3 things. First, be always willing to look under the hood in your mind and say, you know what do I know for sure that may not be appropriate anymore?
Right.
I mean, what are those things? I mean, those things have been anchors of you, and that served a real good purpose. But sometimes you have to start thinking, well, is that belief really serving me good or not?
Yeah.
The other thing is you have to take perspective. You have to be good at taking perspective, which means going from the micro to the macro.
Yes.
Step back and try to see what is happening, not in the task, but in the dynamic that I'm facing, and observe. Try to observe from a neutral perspective. Is this working? And then, of course, once you figure out if you need to pivot or not, what you need to do, you have to bring action into the equation, because action really is what moves things forward. You have to have agency. So the willingness to look and to review your identity, the willingness to take perspective, to make sense out of what is happening around you, more than likely to find what is limiting you from achieving your goals. And the agency to keep on doing that is what I recommend people do. And in this 3-legged stool, it is very important to reflect. Have the time to say, you know what, if I were advising a friend, this is me, to who the things are happening. But if this was happening to a friend, what advice would I give to my friend, to solve the problem, because in that way you kind of take up the perspective of an observer and not the protagonist, and you find better solutions. It's kind of a little bit conceptual, but I find that it works.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a reason that, whether it's a therapist or a coach or whoever, they offer a good consultant that's not only trying to give themselves work will say the same thing. They suggest taking a step back and stepping into that role, something that they would do when they're asking the question. They suggest doing it because it is conceptual, but it's important when it's that old adage, right? You can't read the label from inside the bottle. When you're in it, you can't see everything. You're so stuck in that one perspective.
And most of the times, there is another element right there, because even when you find that something is not working, the next question is, do I want to change or not?
Amen.
Yeah, because, I learned this from none other than James Taylor, the folk singer.
Mm-hmm.
An interview, he was saying that he went through an addiction and he had a big problem. And he said something that is, from that time to this day, I really cherish that insight. He says, it's not the same knowing that you have to change and not knowing how to, trying to find a way.
Yeah.
Compared to knowing that you have to change, but deep inside of you don't wanting to.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And some people, they want to change, they don't know how to. Fine, we can help. But
yes.
That somebody tells you have to change, you say, yeah, I may want to, but deep in my heart, I don't want to. Nothing. I mean, I say that's beyond redemption. I mean, that doesn't really help. And you have to face, sometimes that's what a crisis does, right?
Mm-hmm.
Forces you to say, you know what, I cannot live with this anymore. I need to change.
Yes. And I would also offer that sometimes a lot of times people will tell us what they think we need to change about ourselves. And that's just that's their perspective based on their experience and their life. They're not the ones living your life. So there's a balance in there as well, right? Is that it's okay. What I always think is that as long as you're making an intentional choice, if you're looking at something that requires a change and you're saying, I don't know how to do this, but I want to figure it out, that's a choice. You're figuring it out. And if you say, I don't want to do this and I just don't want to do it, that's not what I want to change, own the choice and own the consequences, good or bad, of that choice, right? It is that be intentional in whatever it is. That's always the key, because then it's yours.
Just building on what you said, leadership, it's an act of change always.
Yes.
You're supposed to move from today's reality to a better one. Regardless of what you do, you have to grow, you have to improve your KPIs, you have to, be a better person, whatever. There is always a next stage that you aspire to achieve.
Yes.
So if you're not willing, it's really hard. You have to appropriate that and make it yours.
Before we wrap this up, I'm going to ask the question, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about, or something that you want to emphasize where you're like, let's go back to this for a second. I want to make sure we don't forget this, or neither. That's okay too.
I probably just a way to frame the whole thing is that in the stages for change, people always expect that you go from wrong to right in one single step. And that is not in reality the case.
If only it was that easy.
Exactly. For organizations, for yourself. So you have to understand, and I kind of map 4 stages, which it's a way in the implementation of what I do and the framework that I have in my book. I say you start always with assessing your impetus platform, I say, which is this willingness to change or not, this
Yep.
willingness to go forward or not. Then next, what you have to do is to break through the things that are stopping you from change.
Mm-hmm.
It's better to remove barriers first. What is stopping me from advancing? And once you neutralize those effects, or at least make it better to remove those barriers, then you're in a better position to change. Then you start by rerouting yourself and try to start, playing with possibilities. What if I do this? What if I do that? And start, practicing and moving in that direction. Even if our baby steps, it's fine. And then you get into the regrowth stage that I mentioned, which is where you really unlock potential. So you really move through those 4 stages. And by the way, the reason why I chose the name of Regrowth for my book, because of that. In reality, when you see organizations and people, individuals, there is no way to have a 45-degree ascending line all the time, improving and becoming better, getting better results eternally. We go through slumps, we regress, we hit walls, we stall. So if you take a long-term perspective, the trick here is, how do I regrow once I hit a wall, once I stagnate? And that's exactly what you have to do to recalibrate yourself.
Yeah.
Am I willing to do this? Yes or no? What are the limitations that I have? And you have to assess, quite frankly, with objectivity, I have this problem and this needs to be solved. Then you imagine possibilities and then you get good at that. So that's kind of in a nutshell, the path that I suggest to follow.
Well, I would argue that that's also a great, whether you're an organization or a team or an individual, it's a great path to follow regardless. That makes sense in all of those scenarios, right? As an individual, you can do that for you as well, which is a great path series framework to be able to use.
If you think about using the R's, you start with assessing where you are, and then you have to remove, and then you have to reroute, and then you have to regrow. That's exactly just as in nature. By the way, that's what happens in nature.
Well, Ernesto, thank you for chatting with me today. This has been fascinating. I appreciate your generosity of sharing your stories and your insights. I hope everyone goes and checks out your website. Will be in the show notes, as I believe a link to the book will be as well. But the website is Aspen Mindset1, and that's the number 1.com. They can find out more about you there. And I really appreciate.
And they can contact me on LinkedIn as well if they want.
Perfect.
Ernesto Gómez Arzapalo. We here in Mexico, we use the two last names.
Yep.
So Arzapalo is Arzapalo, Ernesto Gómez Arzapalo. And just, send me a note or something, and I'll be more than happy to chat or discuss anything that your audience wants.
Perfect. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. So thank you for taking the time today.
My pleasure,
Greatly
Céline.
Insightful.
It was a great conversation. Thank you.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to Leading Through Crisis, hosted by Céline Williams and brought to you by Revisionary. To learn more, visit leadingthroughcrisis.ca. Connect with Céline on LinkedIn and explore the show notes for resources and next steps. Until next time, keep leading with courage and clarity.